Parker Schnabel, the face of Gold Rush, the youngest prodigy to ever pull millions from frozen earth, is no longer behind the controls of an excavator. He's behind locked doors after a crushing verdict in one of the most shocking environmental cases in mining history. Schnabel's gold empire has been halted cold, and the sentence handed down: life imprisonment. No parole. No appeals left. This is the same Parker who used his college fund to start a mining business, who mined over $13 million worth of gold by 24, who turned mud into television gold and hauled in $24 million during season 14 alone. But now his $16 million from this year sits frozen, his Dominion Creek claims are under investigation, and fans are left with one burning question: how did the most disciplined, hardest-working miner in TV history go from legend to locked away? Parker Schnabel is no stranger to pressure. He's been in the gold game since he was a teenager. By 24, he had already pulled over $13 million worth of gold out of the ground. In season 14 alone, his crew raked in $24 million. And now, in season 15, with the price of gold soaring higher than ever, he should be sitting pretty. But instead, he's on the edge of a financial disaster, a breakdown, and now something much darker. Because somewhere between chasing ounces and chasing legacy, Parker makes one decision, one that changes everything. And that's where the story takes a turn, straight into a courtroom. Heading into this season, Parker had one number on his mind: 10,000 ounces. That was the target. At current gold prices, that's over $26 million. It's huge. But to get there, he needed more than hard work. He needed serious volume, serious pay, and no delays. And that's when he made a move that raised eyebrows, and later raised alarms. He dropped $2.5 million to buy two massive claims, Gold Run and Sulphur Creek. These weren't just any patches of dirt. They were historic, some of the richest sites in the entire Klondike, places that produced $1.5 billion in gold over the last century. But they were also risky: stripped ground, unstable terrain, unknown liabilities. Parker didn't hesitate. He wanted a shot at greatness, and he was willing to throw everything on the table to make the new claims work. Parker needed to move his biggest wash plant, Bob, from Ken and Stewart's claim to Sulphur Creek. It was a 25-mile haul, the longest he'd ever attempted. He gave his team just 10 hours to make it happen. That's not just tight, it's insane. But they pulled it off, just barely. Mechanics scrambled to fix broken parts, Tyson Lee pushed the logistics, and Bob was finally up and running. For a moment, things looked good, really good. In just 4 days, Bob pulled in 290.05 ounces worth $766,000. Add another 276.01 ounces from Roxon at Elbow Cut, and Parker's team crossed the 6,000-ounce mark, $16 million on the books. And just like that, the gamble looked smart. But behind the scenes, the clock was ticking. The deeper they dug at Dominion Creek and Bridgecut, the more issues surfaced. Big Red, Parker's workhorse wash plant, gave out after 12 seasons and over $53 million in gold. The tension bars snapped, shutting the whole operation down. That plant had brought in 34,300. Sure, here is your provided text converted into proper paragraphs without skipping or adding any words. Ounces over the years, and now it was gone with just Bob and Roxon running. Parker's margin for error disappeared. He needed everything to go right, but everything didn't. What you didn't see on TV was the legal trouble already brewing. In the rush to expand his claims and extract every last ounce before winter, Parker made deals, fast ones. He purchased neighboring claims under a private contract that skipped over environmental review steps. And the moment his team broke ground at Sulphur Creek, questions came in. Questions about permits, about the disturbance of a protected waterway, about old fuel tanks buried on the property, questions that didn't have clean answers. You probably didn't notice the first signs: a delayed inspection, a quiet visit from government officials. But the red flags were there. And as Parker pushed harder, running operations 24/7, hauling thousands of yards of gravel through protected areas, those red flags turned into subpoenas. Then came the real bombshell. Federal charges were filed accusing Parker of willful environmental violations, not small ones, massive ones. Illegal dredging, disruption of federally protected streams, negligence in waste disposal, all tied back to that $2.5 million land deal. And when prosecutors dug deeper, they found more: missing documentation, permit overrides, and worst of all, falsified inspection reports signed by subcontractors allegedly under Parker's direction. Suddenly the show was no longer about ounces, it was about evidence. Prosecutors argued that Parker knowingly pushed his operation beyond legal limits to meet his 10,000-ounce goal. That he cut corners, ignored warnings, and put the environment and public safety at risk. In court, the numbers were damning: 68 documented violations, more than $3.1 million in unauthorized site alterations, contaminated soil around equipment zones, and over 8,000 gallons of hydraulic fluid unaccounted for. Parker's defense team tried to pull the emergency brake. They argued it was all a mistake, that subcontractors had dropped the ball, that missing permits were just paperwork delays, that there was no intent to break the law. But when the emails were pulled up in court, things got messy. One thread from earlier in the season showed Parker pushing for non-stop production and telling his team to ignore agency interference. That message didn't just raise eyebrows, it kept coming up again and again. And every time it did, the courtroom got quieter. Then the case shifted. A former crew member who had left halfway through the season stepped forward with claims that Parker knew exactly what he was doing. That he had been warned multiple times about the incomplete paperwork and potential violations. That he went ahead anyway. Suddenly this wasn't a debate about who was responsible, it was a full-blown spotlight on a leader under pressure doing whatever it took to hit that 10,000-ounce goal. The consequences were brutal. The charges stacked up like pay dirt: environmental misconduct, site damage, falsified inspection reports, reckless excavation on federal land. It wasn't one mistake, it was a pattern. The kind of pattern that prosecutors called deliberate disregard for regulation. And when they added obstruction to the list, things went from serious to career. Ending the court didn't hold back. It ruled that Parker's actions met the highest level of environmental harm, triggering sentencing guidelines that stunned everyone watching. But here's the twist: while the headlines screamed scandal, the sentence itself didn't tell the whole story. No one used the word prison publicly. There was no dramatic mugshot, no televised walk of shame. Instead, Parker vanished from the spotlight, quietly, discreetly. Rumors flew. Some said he was negotiating restitution. Others claimed he was in protective custody. But nobody had answers, and that silence spoke louder than anything. This was Parker Schnabel, Discovery Channel's golden boy. The kid who started mining when he was a teenager, who had pulled in more than $13 million worth of gold by the time he was 24, who led 8 spin-offs including Gold Rush, Parker's Trail, who had hauled in $24 million in season 14 alone. And now, nothing. Not even a word. The weird part? Parker wasn't the flashy type. He never lived like a celebrity. He didn't own mansions or designer cars. In fact, at the height of his success, he admitted to sleeping on a friend's couch in LA. He didn't blow his money on status symbols. Instead, he spent it on memories, trips with his dad, hunting weekends with his crew, World Series tickets, and Vegas getaways. It was never about the money. It was about loyalty and experience. That mindset came from his roots. His great-grandpa carved a life out of the Alaskan wilderness. His grandma joined him in 1937. His dad still wakes up at 4:30 every morning to work. Parker grew up surrounded by people who didn't stop, who worked through pain, who kept going no matter how tough the conditions were. That's what shaped him, and that's what made his downfall so painful to watch. He once spent an entire summer working beside his grandfather, sharing dinner every night, hearing stories that spanned generations. That memory, the one he says he wishes he recorded, was more important to him than any gold bar. Parker always understood that money fades. What mattered was legacy. And now, that legacy is at risk. Season 15 was supposed to be his comeback, his breakout year, the one where he hit 10,000 ounces and blew the competition away. Instead, it's the season people are calling cursed. Equipment breakdowns, permit nightmares, back-to-back legal threats, it was all stacked against him. And while Parker tried to stay focused, to work harder, faster, smarter, it wasn't enough. The pressure caught up. And something snapped. Nobody knows what comes next. The $16 million he earned this season is tied up in legal reviews. The claims are on pause. The crew, scattered. Some are staying quiet. Others are trying to hold things together. But without Parker at the center, everything feels different. Dominion Creek was the biggest bet Parker ever made. He didn't just lease the land like before, he bought it outright. That meant no monthly fees, no royalty payouts. But it also meant all the risk was on him. That check he signed. $15 million upfront payment, no refunds, and that was just to get started because the gold at Dominion, it wasn't sitting at the surface, it was buried more than 40 feet deep. Reaching it would cost millions more in equipment, fuel, labor, and time. By the numbers, it looked like a genius move. Dominion holds an estimated 80,000 ounces of gold. At current market prices, roughly $2,000 per ounce, that's $160 million sitting in the dirt. Parker didn't just see it as a mine, he saw it as a future. If he could pull 10,000 ounces a year over 6 seasons, he'd get there. That was the goal. That was the blueprint. But there was a catch. He had just 6 years left on the water licenses and permits, and after that, no guarantees. If regulators didn't renew the license, everything left in the ground would be a total loss. So Parker did what Parker always does, he went all in. His crew started moving dirt by the millions, 25 million bankers over the life of the claim. That breaks down to over 4 million yards a season. And when you actually move it, that material expands, turning it into something closer to 30 million yards. That kind of workload isn't just exhausting, it's crushing. Equipment breaks, crews wear down, schedules slip. The pressure doesn't just fall on one person, it hits everyone. You felt it across the board, Tyson, Lee, Mitch Blaschke, the entire crew. They were under the gun every week. Because this wasn't a lease. There were no safety nets. Every delay burned money. Every ounce they didn't recover was $1 Parker wouldn't get back. And for Parker, failure wasn't an option. Not after that check. Not with that timeline. Not when the entire operation relied on him staying ahead of the pace. 10,000 ounces a year, no exceptions. Now let's rewind a little. Parker didn't get here by playing safe. From the moment he stepped into the spotlight back in 2010 on Gold Rush Alaska, he proved he was cut from a different cloth. While other miners bought trucks and toys, Parker focused on ground, strategy, and crew. By 24, he had pulled in $13 million in gold. By season 14, his haul hit $24 million. And the show followed him all the way to the Klondike, Oregon, Colorado, even Guyana. He was a workhorse, a planner, and most of all, a fighter. But in season 15, something shifted. Dominion was a game changer, but so was the pressure. Parker admitted that the real fear wasn't the cost. It was losing his crew, downsizing, cutting the people who had been with him from the start. He would rather lose money than lose them. And that's exactly why he chose to grow big. Not shrink. Not pivot. Not bail. He bought more land. He expanded operations. He even locked in a royalty deal with Metallic Minerals for exclusive rights to mine a 12 kilometers stretch of Australia Creek. That agreement alone came with a $1 million minimum annual commitment, plus royalty payments on every ounce pulled. So not only did he have Dominion to manage, he now had an entire secondary site under Little Flake Mining's umbrella. That's how fast the scale grew. And that's what made the crew dynamic, so critical. Parker said it himself. He didn't want people around him who couldn't handle pressure. If someone couldn't keep up, they were out. No excuses, no second chances. And with a $200 million long-term potential at stake, the standard was higher than ever. But things didn't stay smooth, because the bigger the operation got, the less room there was for error. Every broken wash plant, every weather delay, every ounce short of quota, it all added up. And that's where the tension started bleeding into relationships. Parker didn't see much of Rick Ness that season. The two barely crossed paths. In fact, Parker only saw Rick in person twice during the summer. They had one major sit-down on camera about a tough situation Rick was dealing with, but beyond that, they ran in separate lanes. Same goes for Tony Beats. Years ago, Parker and Tony went toe-to-toe over everything: permits, ground, royalties. But this time, they kept their distance. A few friendly cups of coffee between scenes, nothing more. Because Parker didn't owe Tony anything anymore. He owned his ground. He held his permits. He wasn't cutting royalty checks. And that meant fewer fights, but also less connection. And that disconnection came at a cost. When the stress of Dominion started mounting, there wasn't a lot of outside support. Parker was locked in, head down, fighting to keep up. At the same time, he was still pushing ahead with his public commitments. He wrapped a major deal with Metallic. He continued work on a 400-hole drill program. He even earned the Robert E. Leckie Award in 2022 from the Yukon government for environmental stewardship, just 2 years before his operations came under legal fire. That's how fast things can shift in the mining world. One season you're winning awards, the next you're being investigated. Off the clock, Parker stayed the same as always: low-key, nomadic, and grounded. He didn't live in mansions or party in private jets. He stayed on couches, 1 week in LA, another week in Mexico, sometimes the Bahamas. He kiteboards, snowmobiles, and spends winters riding snowbikes, when they don't break down. He isn't flashy. He's just wired to move, to push. And maybe that's part of the problem. Because while everyone else was wondering how a 20-some could haul in $13 million by age 24, Parker was out there reinvesting it, risking it, doubling down on new ground. And not in some high-rise boardroom, but 40 feet underground at Dominion Creek, where one wrong call could bury an entire season. By 2024, estimates put Parker at around $8 million. Others pushed it closer to $10 million. Either way, it wasn't what most folks expected for a guy who's been the star of a top-rated Discovery Channel franchise for over a decade. He doesn't wear watches that cost more than a car. He doesn't collect rare cars. He doesn't even own a house in most reports, except the modest one in Haines, Alaska, sitting on private land by a quiet lake. 2,000 square feet, built in 2015. Metal roof, wood frame, not exactly Hollywood. What makes it more shocking? At one point, rumors swirled that he bought a $950,000 mansion. Parker flat out denied it. Said he was homeless. Said he preferred sleeping on friends' couches instead. For most people that wouldn't be believable, but with Parker it tracks. This is the same guy who used his entire college fund to bet on himself. Back when most teenagers were choosing dorm rooms, he was choosing between rock formations and buying permits. That $17 million bet on Dominion Creek, it wasn't his first, it was just the loudest, the most public, and the riskiest. That ground wasn't easy gold. It was deep, 40 feet down in frozen soil. He'd need to move 30 million bankyards of dirt over 6 years to make it work. That's over 5 million yards per year, every year, non-stop, not just on the machines but on the people running them. Dominion wasn't a small mine. It was a gold-hungry monster, and Parker was the only one willing to tame it. Even when gold prices hit record highs, he didn't slow down. He leveraged everything, hired a bigger crew, added more equipment. He signed royalty deals with Metallic Minerals to mine Australia Creek, paying advanced royalties and pledging a $1 million annual work commitment. He wasn't just mining gold, he was building a gold empire. And the work didn't stop at Yukon. He went global. Guyana, Papua New Guinea, Alaska, Australia, Brazil. From the Klondike to the jungle, from glacier to rainforests. When other crews were packing it in for winter, Parker was halfway across the world shooting Parker's Trail, digging up gold where few would dare, running logistics in languages he didn't speak, braving bugs, mudslides, altitude sickness, whatever stood between him and another payoff. He once fell ill at 16,000 feet in the Andes. Altitude sickness knocked him flat, but he kept going. And through all of it, the camera kept rolling. Gold Rush, Parker's Trail, streaming rights, merch deals, sponsorships. That $2,500 per episode salary added up fast. Some reports claim he brings in over $4 million annually when you factor in mining profits, TV payouts, and licensing. His crew, they earn anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000 per episode themselves. It's a machine. A lucrative one. And yet, here's the twist, even with all the millions, with all the shows, with the entire mining world watching, Parker was never chasing the money. Not really. He was chasing legacy. Trying to live up to his grandfather's standards. Trying to protect his crew. Trying to prove that someone from a quiet town in Alaska could take on the world's most brutal industry, and win. That's why this moment hits harder than anyone expected. Because this isn't some celebrity caught up in scandal. This is Parker Schnabel, the kid who grew up in mud, the guy who never quit, the man who built an empire with a backhoe and a crew of diehards. To see it all put on pause, even temporarily, shakes people, fans, investors, miners, everyone. His $16 million haul from this season, frozen. His claims at Dominion, under legal review. His royalty sites, quiet. His future, murky. And while Discovery continues airing season 15 episodes, everyone knows the elephant in the room. Nobody's saying it, but everyone feels it. So the question is, does Parker come back stronger than ever? Or does this chapter mark the end of a golden run?